everyone. Thanks for sticking around for us. Before we bring our panelists out, we wanted to show you a little sizzle, a little kind of reel about the network. I know people in past panels said they don't like sizzles, but we love sizzles. So, if you don't mind, why don't we play that, and then we'll bring the panelists on.
We're not too different.
Maybe our generation will really change things.
What a blessing! Our first real convert!
We all feel honored, and we feel fully prepared.
Horse Cave 1, I am free and flying.
Food Incorporated, blowing open the food industry.
1 in 4 of our children living in food insecure homes.
No one has read the terms and conditions. No one in the world.
Anything that's been digitized is not private.
What do we Palestinians want it to look like?
Hi, I'm Josh Thomas. Watch me on my show. Please like me. The show is really super vaguely based on my life.
I can never really trust what someone that good looking is into me. Do you know what I mean? I just don't get it. It's they're mediocre looking, I can sort of appreciate why their standards are so low. When they're that pretty, I'm just like, oh, what are you hiding?
Everything is different now. Information isn't top down. It's a shared experience.
I think information is out there. It just depends on where you're trying to find it.
Social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram.
We have a right to say something back, and you're not allowing us to.
We are flipping the whole concept of what news is. You're not just reading about what happened anymore, now you're part of it.
If there was a show that did that, it would probably be my favorite show.
Do something with your news. Take part live.
What you can expect from the show is...
It's not like you have to do the project by yourself.
Real reality.
You need to remember how to speak properly. It doesn't matter what other people say. A lot of people say, oh, you talk white, this, that. No, you speak properly. You're a young black guy, and a lot of the times they expect you to fail, especially where we live. They don't really expect you to be as smart as you are.
When did you find out that they said that you had a gun on you?
Someone gun? I ain't had no gun on.
Advocating for Quadir Felton is something that's very personal to me. I see a lot of different clients every day, but Quadir has inspired me in a way that I have never been inspired before.
This is not your mama's talk show.
When I was a kid, I saw a bully picking on this nerdy kid, and the nerdy kid beat the shit out of him.
Did you ever send any naked pictures of yourself?
No, I've never, ever sent a nude picture to anybody.
You ever received one?
Yeah. Reality is fuller figures are not accepted.
Social media has made it anonymous. I have so many questions that I want answered. You don't consider yourself a feminist?
Totally not a feminist.
You think women should get paid equally to men?
Absolutely.
That's a feminist issue.
Hillary Clinton goes out without makeup. It's front page on CNN.
It's who you are inside that really does matter.
Everybody wants to feel that from their mom.
That is the best thing anyone said all day.
Are we recording?
Ladies and gentlemen, we are making a TV show. It's going to be a half-hour variety show. I'm going to be the host. We're going to have short films, live performances, music, animation, conversations, and more.
Everything you're going to see on this show was made collaboratively by a community of hundreds of thousands of artists from all over the world.
And now that we're making the TV show, I'm gonna be doing one of these videos until we're done with the first season every weekday. That's 5 days a week. I started making these years ago to keep people up to date on Hit Record's various collaborations and let people know how they can contribute and give my feedback as the director.
Happy sampling.
This is a request for visual artists. We have a request for musicians, a request for writers. Humunculus wrote the music, lyrics of which were written by Saint Maker. Metaphors, the writing, Daniel, the performance. Animators do a test animation on these 3 versions of the illustrated character. You said you want to work in show business? The door is open. I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks again.
So that is Pivot, and I'll bring my panelists on now. Awesome. So again, this panel today is all about the building of a new network. You saw some of what Pivot is all about. We really are a new network for us, for this new greatest generation, as we like to say. I'll stand awkwardly behind all of you guys, if that's okay. And I'm really excited to present all this to you and present these great people, all people I admire very much and work very closely with. Again, I'm Nick Borenstein. If you think many moons ago, aka December of 2012, when I was a student, I was in a very similar position to you and what you all were hoping to do. But now I work for this awesome new network, and I'm excited to have us all talk about it today. So before we sort of dive in, I wanted to introduce the panelists, but rather than just read their bios, I thought it'd be great to ask them what they do for our network, and also ask them a fun question. So what we'll do is we'll start with Evan. Evan, our president, let us know what you do for the network, and also, I'm curious to know, before you got into TV, what do you think was one of the most important experiences, not in TV or not in media, that really gave you the skills to do your job best today?
I'll answer the second question first, because that's who I am. When I went to the University of Massachusetts in Amherst in the fall of 1985, and I was looking for something to do in theater, and I was walking through the halls of the student union, and there was a table there signing up for auditions for a musical, and the musical was Snoopy, and it was for an organization called the UMass Music Theater Guild, and so I walked over and I said, I don't want to audition, but I'm a director. Do you have a director? And they said no, and so I agreed to direct that show, and over the course of the ensuing 4 years, most of which I was enrolled in the university, and then some of which I was not, I learned how to produce theater from the ground up, raising money, marketing, building sets, any number of different things. And during the course of those 4 years, I really learned how to be an entrepreneur. Selling tickets, all that kind of stuff, and it was where I learned how to not just be in love with the content creation part of it, but also in fall in love with the business behind content creation, and that's really been those 3 or 4 years were really kind of the progenitor of everything I've been doing since. I'm doing versions of that since then. What I do for the network is, it's hard. It's a hard thing to say. I mean, pretty much what's great about my job is it's never the same twice. So I work in ad sales. I'll go make ad sales presentations for the ad sales group. I work in programming, and I'll help take pitches, or I'll give notes on scripts or shows. I work in affiliate sales. Sometimes I work in operations. I try to help lead the talent that runs the network. I try to help make people's jobs easier and give a North Star to the 70 or 80 people that work on our brand.
Awesome, Craig. And same question goes for you too. Any sort of non-media, non-TV experiences that influences your current role?
Yeah, I'll do what Evan did, and because he's my boss, and I should do whatever he does.
Good note. Good note.
I was trained as a producer. About 4 years in, I had this epiphany. I realized that probably some of the greatest training I ever had as a producer certainly didn't happen in college. It actually, it was working as a waiter. Because I just suddenly realized that, if you look at what you do as a producer and what you do as a waiter, it's multitasking, it's upselling, it's dealing with difficult personalities and managing them, it's stress management, and it was like, wow, there's a complete line between that shitty job that I had to this awesome job that I had. So I always credit that waiting tables as some of the best experience I could have ever had for this. I run digital and live programming at Pivot. I have a background in both promos and marketing, but also content, a little bit of a hybrid background, which is a little unusual in this business. I also have jumped from the broadcast side to digital and back. So in this role, which is really exciting for me, is sort of a real combination of all the different experiences that I've had with a new one, and that is the live television. I've done a little bit of live TV, but now I actually run a live show called Take Part Live, which I'll get into a little later, and that's a daily live show. But I also do a lot of the other sort of ancillary programming, whether it's short-form content for the web, one-off documentaries for Social Action or for our brands, some of the brand entertainment, and that kind of thing.
and passing it to Sean. And Sean, I want to ask you a different question. Sean happens to be the youngest panelist today, and I'm curious to know, Sean, Evan, she's the second youngest, I guess. But so Sean, when you were graduating, what did you think you wanted to do with your career?
When I was graduating from college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I had interned for 3 summers at a financial services company, and I hated it. So it was easy to rule that out. And really, I graduated college. I graduated a few years after September 11th, so the job market wasn't great, which in some ways led me to open it up and try different things and apply to different things. And then I decided, well, I like entertainment, I like media, so I guess I should apply to jobs in that field. And that's what led me here today. In terms of what I do for Pivot, I work in the Research and Insights department, so a lot of that is supporting the companies similar to Evan, but in a different way, understanding our target audience, the millennials, understanding how people are viewing the network, whether that's on air or online, and just trying to be really on the pulse and the front edge of what millennials are doing.
Awesome. Let's bring Holly on now. And Holly, same question from before with Evan and Craig. Non-media, non-TV experiences that influence your current role.
So I started out my career in banking. So I worked probably six blocks down the street at Solomon Smith Barney at 54th and 6th Ave. And I was there for a while, and I was a financial consultant helping people figure out what they wanted to do with their retirement money and other money. And I was really good at it, and I really did not like it. I had moved here right after school. I went to school in California, and I still had friends who were at NYU, and a lot of them were at Tisch, the School of the Arts. So they'd come to me and say, hey, you're really good with money. Can you help me? I'm about to make this little film for my class. I was like, what do you need? So I took a class. I like to budget, production. So I started budgeting and then scheduling and then ultimately producing. And as they started graduating, I started producing their independent film and music videos and documentaries. And so then I just left Solomon Smith Barney altogether, and that's how I got into this crazy business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what do you do currently with Pivot?
Currently, I'm the head of scripted programming, so I oversee all of the comedies, dramas. We're also doing animation. We're looking at, different international co-productions in the sense, and we'll probably talk about one of them that we've got going. So working with other networks in other countries and putting together kind of big deals and big creative shows. So overseeing the creative of it, but also making sure you're on budget and on calendar.
Thank you, Solomon Brothers. And then finally, Robert, tell us a little bit what you do or what you've done to help out the Pivot brand. And for you, I know you had a very interesting background. You always have worked in media. How do you think that has helped you currently in your current role?
Gotcha, thank you. Am I on? Yes. Yeah, I know, thank you. I actually, I'm 3 generations in a TV and a theater family, so I kind of was born in a TV tube as a TV tube baby. And I guess you had asked earlier what were some of my non-media jobs. I think one of them actually probably shaped media today. I did used to babysit Joss Whedon, and his parents didn't like him watching scary movies, so I would let him watch something called Creature Features late at night, deep indoctrination into sci-fi and horror. So I probably have shaped the zeitgeist in more ways than we know.
100%. Thank you, Buffy.
Thank you. And I'm an adopted member of the Pivot family, I would guess. I work with them in an advisory role. I started working with Evan probably 5 years ago when I started researching this target called millennials. I had noticed that people were referring to millennials as kids and not recognizing that they were adults and that they were shaping the path of society in ways that they weren't even seeing. So over several years, we would share our insights, and eventually they asked me to come on board to do a deep dive into the millennial construct for Pivot to understand not just the audience who they were going to have, but the audience who they wanted to have. And also with the understanding that they were going to get back contradictory information. And what I love about working with Evan and the Pivot team is they understand that as researchers, you're not going out there to get one fact. You're going out there to get a variety of facts and a variety of contradictions, and they're marvelous about embracing those contradictions as well.
Awesome. Cool. So, we've met the whole team. You know why we're here. I'm going to pass it over to Evan again to tell us a little bit more about where this idea for Pivot came to be. How did you come up with this idea? To walk us through kind of the early stages of Pivot.
And we talk about this at lunch. I have this habit of doing things that have nothing to necessarily directly do with my job. So in that capacity, for the last couple years, I've been teaching a class at NYU on television, so it's connected to my job. But realistically, it was more to kind of get my mind open to really just break the conventional wisdom out of my head and start to turn ideas about television upside down by forcing myself to learn television every semester to teach it to a bunch of 19 and 20-year-olds who were paying an exorbitant amount of money to take a class. So you have to wake up stupid.
Hey, it was a great
every day.
investment for me.
Yeah, right. And Nick was in class 2 years ago. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
So while teaching that, I had to really investigate where television was headed, both from a distribution standpoint and a content creation standpoint. And so the origins of where the channel is from a distribution standpoint and a business model really was born out of, frankly, at the end of every semester, I do a contest I split the class into a number of groups, and then they present the next big idea. And it's a contest. And Nick's group lost. But
he always brings that up.
winning group actually came up with this concept of a network that would be distributed through traditional models on pay TV, but also over the top through an app. It was actually a tier, not a specific channel, but a tier of channels that you would distribute. That's a fair assessment, right?
Yeah.
And I actually wrote an article about that. It was up on HuffPo in the archives there. So at that moment in time, I was actually, at that time, running IFC and Sundance Channel and wondering what I was going to do when I grew up. And I started to develop a business model to go out and raise money to start a brand new business. And in doing so, I actually pitched Participant Media, which is the company that owns Pivot. And they didn't agree to do my business idea. So we parted ways, and I kept raising money, and I actually was able to raise a decent amount of money of it. And just before I was about to launch that company, Participant called me, and we had a conversation. And they said, well, we don't necessarily want to do your idea, but we have this idea of starting a television network. And I said, the last thing the world needs is another television network. And they said, well, why don't we just talk about it? And what we came down to is, in meeting with Jeff Skoll and our CEO, Jim Burke, I said, if we could do this model, which was distributed through traditional pay TV and via app over the top simultaneously, that's something that could be really exciting to me, and I think it fits your mandate of change. And because they've never done television before, they didn't know enough to say no to me. And so we decided to build a network for the new greatest generation with this interesting distribution and business model, with the mandate of entertainment that inspires social change, which is the Participant mandate. So that's the shortest version I can give you.
Yeah, and why millennials? Why did you think it was important to target this demographic, the best demographic of all, obviously?
There are a number of different reasons. Anytime you have a new idea, and we were talking about this at lunch, you have to look for the white space, you have to look for the opportunity. And while there is a lot of television that is consumed, or a lot of content that is consumed by your generation, the only networks dedicated to your generation right now are very, they're very entertaining, but they're not necessarily very meaningful in their content. There are shows that have meaning, like Friday Night Lights and others like that, but there aren't a lot of destinations on the television or content dial that treat this generation as if they have a soul and a mind. It's much more kind of, not to poke fun at other people, but it's much more Jersey Shore and Pretty Little Liars and things like that, and I felt that there was an opportunity there, a business opportunity. Second of all, it's the largest generation in America, 100 million strong, and then lastly, participants dedicated to changing the world in a positive way. The best way to make change in this world is to talk to the future, and so that's this generation.
Awesome. And we'll dig in a little bit deeper with Sean and Robert a little bit to talk about who we are, who our generation is. But, obviously starting something from the ground up is really difficult. Probably many of you have done that in some capacity. Startups are hard. What were some kind of initial challenges you faced with Pivot or kind of with building this brand new endeavor?
And I think everybody can participate with this, but the hardest, there are two things. Getting a new channel on the dial is a very difficult thing. Two, attracting great talent to a brand new startup is very, very hard. Each one of these people had jobs at other places that had bigger budgets and more history, and frankly were easier jobs. I mean, no offense to anybody here, but it's just much easier to work at a company that has a large infrastructure than going somewhere that's a startup. And so attracting great talent was key, and so that was a big part of it, because I very much believe that first who, then what. So putting the right people in the right seats and attracting the right talent really dictates your success. And then secondarily is, we talk about this audience in a very progressive way. It's not necessarily the way the rest of the world looks at the millennial generation. I don't know, as Courtney said earlier, I don't know why people think that only the negative things apply to this generation. I also don't know why that a lot of brands and a lot of people out there in the world think that this is the first generation of 20-year-olds and 25-year-olds that are considered narcissistic, navel-gazing, self-entitled, blah, 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 blah. My generation was called that 25 years ago. The generation before that was called that 50 years ago. The generation before that, the greatest generation, the people who were credited with fighting and winning World War II, before World War II, they were considered narcissistic, navel-gazing, entitled, spoiled, blah, 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 blah. And then they were asked to step up and fight the largest crisis the world had ever known. Very similar to what's happening right now. So that is a big challenge. The opportunity, though, is in understanding this generation, people are now looking to us, this tiny little brand, as experts in this field, because we camped out this space very, very early on. So I don't know how you
I was just going to say another more sort of logistical challenge in this stuff too is that Participant Media had never done television before. It's a studio, it's a film studio, and MTV or Disney or any of these big major media companies, when they start new channels, they just kind of move 10 people over and say just go do this thing over there, give them a little bit of budget, but they build it on the backs of something that this massive operational thing that has been around for 20, 30 years or longer. We were literally, there was nothing at all. And so that was a challenge of the likes I've never been through before, because in addition to actually building this thing from the ground up, we also had to do a major amount of educating with the parent company, and they were unbelievably receptive to, which was awesome. But that added to the amount of work that had to get done. It was a challenge like I've never been through, for sure.
There was also a time crunch. I joined this company 18 months ago. A year ago, we didn't own the properties that we have now. Craig launched a live show in 90 days. Holly found Please Like Me last May. We got it on air in August. We really forced ourselves to do this quickly, but we also proved you can do it, and we did it under budget too.
Yeah. It's been a crazy feat, being internally too. My impression too, and this is kind of for Holly and Craig as well, and Evan, in traditional TV, it takes a very long time to develop and produce original content. Do you feel like, and Holly, this is directed at you because you did a huge feat with Please Like Me, how difficult was that process to really join a brand new team and then be pushed to do something kind of unheard of?
It was difficult. It was a challenge, though, and as Evan and I always kind of joke, if I have a challenge, I will just go for it. Mm-hmm. So it was like, all right, can we find a comedy that will be ready for this year to launch? Well, hell yes, I will make that happen. Mm-hmm. And so Please Like Me was pitched to us as something that was a format adaptation. So similar to The Office, where it was a English show, you make the American version, and we saw it had just finished airing probably 2 to 3 weeks before we got it, and it was one where it had only had one season. They were still considering if they were going to do a second season, and we decided that basically we could air that, make that deal, which was long nights, like we're making a deal with Australia, so we're in the office at 10 p.m., like, okay, you're going to talk about that? We'll be here. And then calling back in half an hour, at that point's okay, let's move on to the next one. And with us doing that, then we were also able to see how it did and then order season 2 right away, so that when season 2 will air next summer, instead of just one season that we've redone, airing next year, we've got 2 seasons that we're able to exploit on our air. And it was challenging, but it was really fun.
And that speaks to, we tend to break rules. Getting a live show on in 90 days is unheard of. Buying 2 small, teeny tiny cable networks that no one really had ever heard of and combining them together in the course of less than 12 months is not something I don't think anybody else has ever done. Most people with Please Like Me would have seen that show and decided to turn it into an American version, and most The Office is the exception, it's not necessarily the rule. Most brands would have probably just grossly made that American and lost a lot of the charm from it. We saw in that something that we thought our audience could actually get over the fact that they have Australian accents. And we were right, and the press went crazy for it. If you haven't seen it, it's on Pivot, but it's also up on iTunes too. It's a really strong show, and now that we're producing a second season, Holly's going to spend the rest of the next 12 months in Australia. But we tend to not follow the conventional wisdom with regards to many of the aspects of what we do.
And on that note, Evan made me think of something. Josh Thomas, who's the creator of Please Like Me, is very young. He's a very young creator, and I know some 25. Of you in the audience. What'd you say?
25.
Yeah, 25, which is huge. I believe and I hope that we'll start to see more young creators in the space. And I know some of you in the audience are creators as well. And I'm curious, Holly and Craig and Evan on the creative side, what you might recommend to young creatives to branch out and to get to people like you.
Yeah, well, Josh is someone who's been a very prolific writer. He went to Edinburgh Comedy Festival when he was 17. He won the Australian Comedy Festival at 19. He actually wrote this treatment when he was 21. So it took him a few years to just get it up and going. It's if you're a comedian going to the comedy circuits. I'm in town going to the Comedy Festival right now, scoping new talent. It's, kind of getting as much as you can, doing the YouTube thing. We source a lot of talent from online. It's being able to show that you have an idea that you can conceptualize and you can follow through with it in a way, and not just kind of have that germ of an idea. But it's a lot of hard work. It's traveling. It's making sure that you're getting in front of as many audiences as you can, because once you create that fan base, the Twitter feeds, like all of that, it will build, and then people will start paying attention.
I'm going to harken back to something Megan said, which is authenticity is the only currency that matters. And Josh's story is incredibly authentic. It is his life story. But I also think Megan speaks that. I think Josh, Jacob, and Kara on Take Part Live, even the cast of Jersey Strong, which is our nonfiction show, these are all authentic voices that not a lot of people give enough of a canvas to on most channels. Most of what you see on television is incredibly prepackaged and focus tested. No offense to focus testing, but we really are trying to let authentic voices ring through.
Yeah, Take Part Live is sort of it's a conversation around the news and things that you could do about it, things that things you could take action around, things that concern you and stuff like that. When we were looking for talent, we had pretty much everyone you could imagine came through from the agents and stuff like that. And I think one of my first requests of the agent was please don't send me any hosts. People who are sort of professional hosts, and those people play a very important role in entertainment. No slag to hosts at all, but what I wanted with these hosts was that they had to have some kind of passion. They had to be unbelievably passionate about something. I didn't really care what it was, whether it was politics or whether it was music or whether it was video games. It didn't matter, but they had to want to take that. They wanted to translate that passion to this larger idea of getting involved. And that again speaks to authenticity. So that's kind of what we're about here. And it's when I look at at storytellers and people who are interested in engaging with the culture. It's really, I'm looking at these people who are taking it upon themselves to go out there and find these stories, to craft them together into interesting videos, whether they're short form or long form. I meet with these people all the time. There's a lot of people out there who are just taking it upon themselves to go out around the world and tell these stories. So if that's something that's of interest, if you're interested in journalism and this kind of thing, go out there and do it. It's actually very possible.
Yeah, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt is another really good example of that. So he's got this, I don't know, does anybody here know Hit Record, what his thing that he does? So he founded this website, which is an open source collaboration. It's not user generated. It is a crowdsourced studio. So he's the benign dictator, and he creates content. He puts out requests called regularities, and he asks for specific things, and then collaborators upload stuff, whether it's lyrics or chords or animation, and then he crafts it into a larger piece of art. It's a little Warhol-esque, actually, and it's terrific. And so he pitched that to us as a television show. He had nothing to look at, really. He had a bunch of short films, and we said, okay. And now we have this open source created collaboration television show called Hit Record on TV, which is launching on January 18th on Pivot. Check your local listings. And it's like nothing else I've ever seen. I mean, not every second of it is brilliance, but the brilliant parts are brilliant. And it is what we're striving for is stuff that you're not going to see anywhere else. And Jacob, Kara, Joe, Josh, these are all talent. Megan, these are authentic talents for this generation, of this generation. And that's another thing we're trying to do a little bit differently. Megan McCain, I really did not want to take that meeting, and because she and I have very different views of the world. But she came in, and we got into an argument in that first meeting, and we both walked away from that meeting saying, that's somebody who I have to work with. And she is a breath of fresh air to our network. She has been one of the most important personalities for us, despite the fact that politically it might not be someone you thought we were going to work with at first blush. She has been an enormous brand carrier for us because she's real.
Yeah. Well, and we're talking a lot about the content that's on the network. I'm a millennial. Many of you are millennials, whatever that means. We're 18 to 34-year-olds. We're passionate. We're optimistic about the future. Robert and Sean, when we talk about this generation and what we're looking to see, what did you find in your research? What is our generation looking for in television? What do we hope to see on Pivot?
Well, my smartest response would be to ask you in the audience, but I'll jump ahead. I don't think anybody should have any illusions. Most of TV is an echo chamber, and most TV executives live by ratings numbers. And ratings numbers, and you've said this wonderfully, Evan, you don't hear any applause, you don't hear any boos. You're just getting the cold numbers there. And most TV executives, if they want to know what millennials look like, turn on MTV. Okay? I mean, that is as much of a loop as you're seeing there. What Evan and other networks who we work with do, which is different, is they invest in sending field of researchers out into the marketplace and sitting with millennials and talking with them and watching TV with them and going out to play with them and seeing what they care about. And it's interesting because it's a generation that gets knocked for getting an award just for showing up. Well, if you look at where they showed up, they should get an award. Because, instead of having the upward mobility of previous generations, you're looking at a generation where, well, in a biblical sense, it used to be the sins of the fathers were visited upon the children. In this case, it's the sins of the fathers, bankers and politicians and bosses that are being visited upon the children. So that very much shapes perspective of the millennials. So in our research, for the first few minutes, we heard all about the optimism, but then you got into the overwhelming anxiety and what a heroic thing it is just to keep going in the day-to-day and make change happen. So I think that's actually where Sean takes over on a daily basis with research as well.
Yes. And I was actually going to say, before Robert started working with our team, we had also done some research talking to millennials, doing qualitative and quantitative work to really see if there was a need or if issue-based programming, like we're trying to do on Pivot, if that would be interesting to people. And we did find out that about 2/3 of millennials would be interested in the programming, so that sort of proved Evan's business model to begin with. But everything Robert just said is what we're finding. We're still engaged with millennials. We have an online community panel where we do a lot of things. We have live chats with them time when we're watching shows. We vote on surveys. It can be anything from sexting to what's the next big thing, and really just trying to stay in line with the target and help programming and everyone else, even affiliate sales and the ad sales team, to make decisions about that and who to partner with.
And just one thing I would add is how. You know, you talk a lot about what, but, you know, one of the things we try to do is, I believe that there's going to be this 60-40 rule, which is 60% of the television audience will be very much the way that it's delivered today, and 40% will be this myriad of different pathways to getting television content. And that may sound like, oh, well, a lot of the universe is going to stay as it is. 40% of the television universe, we talked about how many homes there were, that's 40+ million homes converting to something other than the traditional pay TV model. That's why we're building this different delivery system where we believe in the pay TV ecosystem as it exists today, but we want this app where you can buy the channel via our app anywhere you go, even if you're just a broadband subscriber and not a pay TV subscriber. So we are trying to predict the future a little bit.
Yeah, and that makes me think, Craig, kind of your world with this idea of live and digital programming, especially with Take Part Live, how difficult or maybe easy do you think it has been to create a show in this space that's historically been watched a certain way, like the news, for instance? You know, it's people have watched it a certain way, but you're now creating something new and fresh for this young generation with Take Part Live. My question for you is, you know, what's that challenge been like to craft a new show for this new greatest generation?
Well, I think the show is perfect, and
Yep.
it was really easy to do.
It is.
And,
Pivot.tv.
No. Well, you know, it's a very good. It's a very interesting that you're asking that question now, because, you know, we launched. As Evan said, we put the show together in ridiculous amount of time. The whole thing came around. Jeff Skoll asked Evan back in December what news would look like on this network, and it was an interesting question because this was a general entertainment network. Number one, where news doesn't really quite fit in, and number two, what does this audience really feel about the news? And we knew right away, of course, going into tradition, we wanted. It was an interesting question for two reasons. One, you know, we were an issue-based network. We wanted to be a part of these important conversations, many of which we see in the news. So we knew we needed to be in this conversation, and we could be possibly even driving this conversation. But we also knew that doing it in a traditional format would be a bad idea. So we saw this as a great opportunity to create an experience where our audience can connect with representatives of their audience, or of themselves, on air in a live environment, and have discussions around this, which felt to us a more authentic way of addressing news and these important issues. So very easy to do. That's a very easy idea to come up with. Now, how to actually do it was the real challenge. And you know, so we looked at everything from Daily Show, of course, to Huffington Post Live, Bill Maher's show, Russell Brand's show. We even looked at things like Attack of the Show, which had nothing to do with news, but there were very interesting reasons to look at that show. It served its audience really well. It was an hour live every night. A lot of other reasons. And what we ended up with in very short order, you know, now we're about 90 days in, and there was the interesting phase where we're looking at what we built and deciding, is this the thing that we wanted to do? An interesting thing about live television and this kind of thing, especially daily live TV, is that you know, every day is a day to create the show that you want to. It evolves extremely quickly. So the show that we launched with on August 1st has radically changed in 90 days. But we're still asking this question, is this the show that we want to do? And I will say that, you know, I think this format, and I've been involved in a lot of different formats, I mean, they're all hard. I think this one is particularly hard. Live television, taking advantage of everything that live brings to the table, and, you know, the talent involved, the writing involved. It's unbelievably complicated. I've never been a part of anything like it. So I don't know if I quite answered the question. I think I'm very happy with the show that we launched. I think but I think what's also exciting about this is that we can see it going so many different ways, and we're excited to make that happen.
That's what's fun about it. It's kind of like the web in that it's not ever really locked in stone.
Right.
So we're running out of time, so I'm going to leave you guys with one final question, and then we'll open up for Q&A. So we had a great review written about Jersey Strong, and I don't know, for those of you who haven't seen Pivot, go to pivot.tv, check us out. If you can, request us, we'd really appreciate it. But so, someone said about Jersey Strong that it's maybe what television itself is missing, in that it's really opening up this void. I'm curious to ask all of you, what do you think television is missing, if anything, that maybe this new generation, my new generation, can kind of breathe life into?
I go back to something Robert said, which is chaos. Everything you talked about that this generation faces, that when you ask this generation, what does the world look like, it all boils down to just chaos. You look at Reddit, you look at the news, you look at Washington, D.C., and it's just chaos. And I like chaos. Chaos, I know that those are all bad things, but I think great opportunity comes from chaos, and I think too much of television is too slick.
I have to concur. I think you have a generation that is learning to be comfortable outside of their comfort zone.
Right. Miley Cyrus.
Again, do not diss Miley. I mean, think of the range of what we're looking at here and what we're reflecting in our society, and take Terry Richardson out of the picture. But when you look at what TV is not reflecting, it's the disruption that everybody is dealing with. And there is that sense of authenticity that your audience can sniff, and they will follow that, and they will share that. So having, again, as you talked about your format changing, adaptable systems on the edge of chaos are essential for you and the world that you're facing, and also appealing in the TV constructs that you look at as well.
When I look at programming and look at what I want to bring to it that I don't see out there, I do look at that unique voice that's coming through, and you want to, you kind of want to herd it a little bit to make sure it's in a format that you can understand, but you also don't want to take that specialness out of it. And we talk a lot about not overnoting. We want someone to have that vision, but it's also, we want to ask a lot of questions. And so we want to be like, if aliens were to invade, what would actually happen? Not the big network broad, oh my God, but it's that Walking Dead question of if the zombie apocalypse would happen, what would you do? And looking at everything kind of through that light is how we've been approaching things. And it's also kind of giving credit where we think credit's due. We look around, and Evan mentioned it a little bit earlier, we look around at other programming for the millennials, that 18 to 34, and we feel like they're kind of being pandered to a little bit. And we really want to kind of respect our audience and also give them things that we think they can see themselves reflected in, and that's something that I think is missing.
Yeah, sort of what everyone else has been saying, I agree with. I think for me it's variety and diversity. I feel like a lot of the networks that you're watching now, if you took the logo off the screen, you would have no idea if you were watching VH1 or Bravo. And everything has that slick feel to it. Even the reality TV programming, we all know is not real, and a lot of times they're re-editing or redoing things, and that's not how real life looks, and it seems really fake. So that would be something I would like to see change.
I guess I'll be a little bit of a contrarian here. I having worked both in digital and on the TV side, and having produced stuff on both, I think about this a lot, that TV does what TV does, digital does what digital does for reasons. These are different platforms, and I think there's a tendency to look at the two things, look at TV and go, why aren't you being more like these guys over here? And digital shaking their fists at TV, going, you guys are the old guys. But you have to remember that that this giant screen that you're sitting back like this on your couch is a different experience when you're doing this, clicking on something, watching it for 2 minutes. They're very different formats. Now, there is convergences happening in really interesting ways around the content, but at the end of the day, I think the constant in all this stuff, and where I feel more confident about, or when I guess don't really agree that things are missing per se, is that it's just about good storytelling. Mm-hmm. It's really what this is about. And using that medium, whatever it is, whether it's a 2-minute web video or a 6-second Vine video, or it's a 30-minute show. It's about using that medium to the best of its ability. That said, I think there is massive disruption at work here, and I think the television business is in for some serious shit.
Well, I think reflecting that disruption, because a half-hour Vine video would be terrible. And most podcasts make terrible TV shows. We know that. There are some structure to the medium, and there's some differences. However, reflecting those changes, so a bit of Vine in your 30-minute show shows that you are in touch. So I think a lot of what TV is not doing is reflecting the common cultural constructs within which we're consuming our information. They're instead just trying to stretch it out into TV form instead of recognizing that you should reflect it and then also bring your story to the table.
This is the kind of thing we
well.
talked a lot about with Take Part Live, was that we didn't want to have our hosts go over to the tweet wall like they have on CNN, where there's giant video of tweets flying all over the place. And but it's interesting having a few months into the show. It's like I start to understand why TV handles it this way. It's really kind of a hard thing. These are different platforms.
Yeah, and an executive asked for it in the boardroom, and there's such a difference between the boardroom and the living room, and that's where the rubber hits the road.
Right.
Yeah. All right, great. So let's open it up to any questions you might have. Please like me button green right there.
So the concept of pivot is very different from what we see in TV right now. So what strategy did y'all, what strategy did y'all make when y'all were pitching pivot to advertisers, as well as thinking about, getting...
I knew there was something we were forgetting. Strategy. No, the concept was we did a tremendous amount of research, and we looked for the white space. And what we found was your generation cares, and that was not being reflected. And that we have a ton of research that demonstrates that your generation will actually change brand loyalty based on the core values of the companies and the brands that are represented in the marketplace. And that every company needs to have some part of that in their strategy. Doesn't mean you have to hit them over the head, but like Warby Parker, you make a good product, and then you have a soul. And you communicate those things through one big brand. Even Apple. Apple doesn't necessarily do a lot of social responsibility stuff, but they give computers to schools, and their mechanisms change the way we communicate. That says a lot about their values. And so our entire brand premise is we are going to use good storytelling to help make change, and that change is what will attract the next generation of viewers and change makers themselves.
I think one of the keys for you, Evan, as well, is brand transparency. Is that Pivot has this marvelous initiative of knowing the background of where the money's coming from, who's the advertiser. And it makes a huge difference if it's brought to you by Coke, if it's Coca-Cola or the Koch brothers, and you should know
that. Question in the back?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, where does the trust, it's endearing and it's nice, but where does the trust for that the millennials will respond to this wonderful kind of new format of programming? Where does that trust stem from? Is there another place besides the research?
Part of it's the research, and a good part of that is, it really does stem from the research. We asked them, is this something you'd be into? And they said yes. And then you also have Participant Media. Many of you probably don't know this, but it's a 10-year-old company founded by Jeff Skoll, who made a few $1 billion co-founding eBay, and then decided to dedicate the rest of his life to making the world a better place. The entire premise of Participant is entertainment that inspires social change. Good Night and Good Luck, Syriana, Food Inc., The Cove, An Inconvenient Truth, Waiting for Superman, Lincoln, The Help, Best Exotic Marigold Hotel, 45 films, 35 Academy Award nominations. We have a little bit of history doing this. And frankly, the films that have made the greatest change have also helped make us the most money. An Inconvenient Truth is one of the most successful documentaries of all time. It also created a tremendous difference in the world at the same time. An Inconvenient Truth, Al Gore doing a PowerPoint presentation of all things. But it made $35 million domestic and about $75 million international. That's, for a documentary, that's just unheard of. It won an Academy Award. It won him a Nobel Peace Prize. And the only reason we all know about global warming is because of that film. So, or one of the precipitating events of spreading the word of global warming came from the message that that film carried. Is that fair? Okay, I got a little skepticism over here. And North Country, which is a film that we produced with Charlize Theron, we used that film to help get the Violence Against Women Act passed. Food Inc., which was a documentary that we made, we helped get the Childhood Nutrition Act passed. The Cove, which was an Academy Award-winning documentary, we helped stop dolphin fishing off the coast of Japan. Waiting for Superman helped get the Rubber Room here for teachers closed. So we have history of both selling a lot of tickets and making change. And that's what we're trying to do here with Pivot, is take that legacy and bring it to the television dial.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for your time. Thank you all of you for watching as well. Thank you, Logan, and thank you to all of you for participating as well.
I'm gonna make one last pitch here. If this stuff sounds interesting to you at all, please tweet to your cable provider, because we can give you your app, whether you're a pay TV subscriber or not. Please tweet at your internet or cable provider, pivot_TV, and say you want it. And well, that's up to them. So if you want Pivot, please let them know. I mean, we really are dependent on you. The demand from you is really going to dictate whether we're successful or not. So thanks a lot.